Nevertheless, Balkis Abdul Kalam knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that the book was not going to be read by Muslims, period. She anticipated that a controversial book of this sort would be read by Jews, Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, Sikhs, and followers of other religions. More than that, she expected that irreligious people, atheists, and secular people would take more than a passing interest in it. Therefore, Balkis Abdul Kalam decided to insert a few chapters, which would not directly be related to the story of the book. It would be a message meant to respond to the question of those who are concerned about the huge turn which was known as paradigm shift that occurred in the West and changed it from a religious society into a secular society. Balkis wanted to do this for a long time, but she had no means to achieve her goal. She knew that any manuscript she wrote as an unpublished, unknown author, especially one with her particular background, would remain exactly that, an unpublished manuscript. She also knew that she had no financial means to that end. When the opportunity presented itself, she saw it as a godsend. Balkis did not want anyone to accuse her of being an opportunist, so she made her proposal and goal well known to Susan Johnson and her husband Mark Johnson. She made them read her chapters and she accepted the few changes they proposed. Then, and only then, did she add her chapters to the story of Ifat Khan. When Balkis became a Christian, she decided to learn more about her new faith and try to understand why Christianity became a private religion that very few people practice it in the West. It puzzled her that many Westerners forsook Christianity and became either nominal Christians or secular atheists or converted to other religions such as Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism. She began her quest by studying the history of the Church. She learned that there was one Christian church until the first schism happened between the Western Roman Catholic Church at Rome and the Eastern Orthodox Church at Constantinople at the beginning of the 11th century, in 1054 AD. Nevertheless, that split had nothing to do with doctrinal differences. It was a political in nature rather than a theological difference. Her research showed her that the first real schism took place during the Reformation period, which began in October 31, 1517 AD, when Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the door of the castle church at Wittenberg, in Germany with hammer strokes that echoed throughout all of Europe. Since the Reformation, the Church kept on splitting and fragmenting until the present day. The World Christian Encyclopedia estimated at least there are 33,000 Christian denominations in 2001, Johnson, Oxford University, 2nd edition, 2001. Therefore, after the Reformation there were paradigm shift and social upheavals took place all over Western countries, which eventually changed that society from a Judeo-Christian society to a secular society. Balkis decided to study the history of the Church and try to discover the main underlying factors which caused that huge shift to occur. What led to the change from a Christian worldview, where the God of the Bible was the center of all social life, to a secular worldview, where God was removed from all social activities? Why the belief in God became an antiquated and outdated notion which only a few people still hold to it? Why religion became a personal and private matter in most Western countries? To begin with, in the book of Acts we see the Church doing well. Christianity took root in Jerusalem and moved to Samaria, Antioch, Ephesus, Athens, and before the martyrdom of the apostles Peter and Paul it reached to Rome. The Roman persecutions began with Emperor Nero. 11 Roman emperors persecuted the Church of Christ. Nevertheless, for 300 years Christianity continued to grow despite the heavy Roman persecutions, the worst of which was by the hand of Emperor Diocletian, 244 to 311 AD. He claimed that the sun god Apollo appeared to him and informed him that he was jealous of this new rising son of God, called Christ. On this premise, Diocletian vowed by his god to destroy Christianity. He killed many Christians and burned many books of the Bible. His persecution was the last attack of the Roman Empire on Christianity. Soon after Diocletian a new Roman emperor came to power, Constantine the Great, 272 to 337 AD. Constantine faced a formidable rival, Maxentius, who wanted the throne too. Maxentius had superior army. Constantine with a smaller and inferior army had little chance at victory. When the two armies met for battle at the Milvian Bridge, Constantine saw a vision on the sky. He saw with his own eyes in the heavens a trophy of the cross arising from the light of the sun, carrying the message, in hoc signo vinces, which means with this sign, you will conquer. Many historians, theologians, and professors of religious studies collectively agreed that there can be no other explanation for the sudden conversion of Constantine to Christianity without that vision. Due to that vision, Constantine became a Christian and defeated his vastly superior enemy and ascended to the throne of the Roman Empire. Soon after, Licinius and Constantine jointly issued the Edict of Milan, in 313 AD, which allowed religious tolerance to Christians. Not long after, Christianity became the religion of the state. Many Roman citizens became Christians. For another 400 years, the Church continued to function as a spiritual entity. The missionary work continued and to some extent, was very successful. Many European tribes converted to Christianity through the missionary works of Boniface, Columba, Augustine, and Patrick. A large part of Europe was peacefully converted to Christianity. In 410 AD, Germanic tribes sacked Rome and ended the Roman Empire. For some time, the Church filled the gap that had been created by the absence of the central authority. But, the Church had spiritual authority without physical muscles. At the beginning of the 9th century, an incident occurred which changed the course of the Church forever. The Pope Leo III was badly beaten by his enemies who tried to blind him and pull out his tongue, so he would cease to function as Pope. Pope Leo III escaped to France and sought the protection of its king, Charles the Great, Charlemagne, 742 to 814 AD. Consequently, in the Christmas of December 25, 800 AD, Pope Leo III crowned the Frankish king, Charles the Great, a Holy Roman Emperor. This date marked the beginning of the absolute power that assumed by the Roman Catholic Church. By this time, the Eastern Orthodox Church had lost many Christians and Christian lands which were claimed by the sword of Islam. Many Christians in Levant, today Turkey, Palestine, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, Egypt, and North Africa were either forcibly converted to Islam or compelled to live under the Islamic rule, paying a heavy and compulsory jizya. Egypt remained a Christian land and under the reign of the Romans for 800 years until Muslim mujahideen invaded it and conquered them in the 7th century. The sword of Islam made its way into Spain, southern Italy, and Sicily. Genghis Khan entered Hungary, Poland, and Russia. The Mongolian Muslim ruler, Tamerlane, destroyed all Christian settlements in Asia Minor. Muslim invaders had always had their sights on Rome only to be frustrated by the Byzantine army. They had already tried to reach Rome through France, but their advance was blocked by Charles Martel, who defeated them at the Battle of Tours, in 732 AD. The Muslim Ottoman Empire created a powerful army mostly from the kidnapped and stolen Christian children. It was their custom to attack Christian villages and towns and take their children by force, taking them to their capital, in Bursa. Then, they would convert them to Islam and verse them well in the teachings of the Quran and hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad. They called them Janissaries. The Janissaries were corps of slaves made up of kidnapped young Christian boys who were converted to Islam, and became famed for internal cohesion cemented by strict discipline and order. Unlike typical slaves, they were paid regular salaries. But, the Janissaries were forbidden to marry or engage in trade. Their complete loyalty to the Sultan was expected. Therefore, those children would grow up without any emotional attachments to parents, wives, brothers, sisters, or relatives. The only relative they would know and be loyal to would be the head of the Ottoman Empire, the Sultan. They would be highly trained in the art of fighting. They would then emerge as loyal, decisive, and highly effective war machines. Through them, the Ottoman sultans were able to conquer and occupy large areas of Anatolia until finally they invaded and captured Constantinople in 1453. Nevertheless, we need to go back and trace the development of the Church of Rome and find out how it came into existence and how it developed into Christendom. According to the German Catholic theologian, Hans Kohn, Ignatius, 50 to 117 CE, the Bishop of Antioch, was the first one to use the phrase Catholic Church. Hans Kohn, The Church 1967, 297. Ignatius was writing to the local church at Smyrna. By Catholic Church, Kohn maintained Ignatius meant the whole church, the complete church, in contrast to the local churches. He did not refer to any particular local church as Catholic Church, but to the general church. It is important to ask what the phrase Catholic Church means. In the New Testament, the word Catholic is used once, in the book of Acts chapter 4, verse 18. It is used as an adverb which means thoroughly, completely, or totally, but the church is never described as Catholic, page 297. The Catholic Church, here means the whole church, the complete church, in contrast to the local episcopal churches. The doctrine of the Roman Catholic Church's supremacy over other churches according to Kohn is foreign to the understanding of the early churches of the idea of the Catholic Church, page 300. Kohn explains this point, as the church in this sense of the total church is the entire church, it may be called, according to the original usage of the word, Catholic, that is the whole, universal, all-embracing church. Catholicity is essentially a question of totality. In this way, Kohn believes every local church is entitled to the claim to be called a Catholic church. No single church can claim to be alone or has the right to be called the Catholic Church and other local churches not. Kohn states, the great turning point came with Constantine, or more precisely with Theodosius, for under the religious edict of 380 AD, Ecclesia Catholica became the only lawful official religion. Every Roman now had to be a Christian, more particularly a Catholic Christian, page 298. At this time the only true church is the Catholic Church, the all-embracing, total Orthodox Church. Other churches are heretical or schismatic. In his book, The Church, Kohn exposed the many crimes and abuses of the Roman Catholic Church which were embodied in the forms of the persecution of the Jews and the Crusades, the trial of heretics and burnings of witches, of ecclesiastical colonialism and war of religion, of the false condemnation of men and ideas, of the Church's frequent failures in the problems of slavery and war and in social questions, in its identification with certain systems of the society, government, and thought. Kohn, page 26. Through his historical analysis, Hans Kohn wanted the Roman Catholic Church to reform itself in accordance with the New Testament's model of the universal church. He expected that the Roman Catholic Church would repent and accept his program of reformation. Today, the Vatican added more crimes against God and the Jews by recognizing the so-called State of Palestine. Rome refuses to refer to the Promised Land as the State of Israel or Jewish state, but always refers to it as Palestine. Accordingly, the Vatican signs treaty recognizing State of Palestine, Times of Israel, June 26, 2015. Until today, there is nothing called State of Palestine, but there are international pressures headed by the UN and some European countries to force Israel to accept the creation of a global jihadi State of Palestine. Shame on Rome, shame on its Pope, and shame on any Christian supporting such ungodly recognition which is an abomination to God. The Promised Land is given by God as everlasting inheritance to the children of Israel, today Jews, and not to the Muslim Arab invaders, the so-called Palestinians, see Genesis 15, 18-12, 17, 7-8, 28, 13, 35, 11-12, Exodus 23, 31, Psalm 105, 8-11. The Bible also is full of prophecies, which clearly stated that God will gather the Jews from all over the world and he will bring them to their homeland, which he did, see Isaiah 43, 5-6, Ezekiel 39, 27-29, 37, 21-27, Amos 9, 13-15, Jeremiah 16, 14-15, 31, 1. Even the Muslim Quran states that God has given the Holy Land to the Israelites as an everlasting dwelling place, Surah 5, 21, Surah 17, 103, and Surah 10, 93. I know I shouldn't have used the Quran as evidence that the entire Holy Land belongs to the Jews because it is not the word of God. Nonetheless, I have referred to it because it is the only book that the Muslims accept as irrefutable evidence. The promised land that God has given to the children of Israel, today the Jews, as everlasting inheritance includes modern-day Israel, Jordan, and parts of Egypt, Iraq and Syria. The British deceived the Jews and created new countries and named them as Jordan and Iraq and gave them to the Arabs. Those Arabs went to bed as Palestinians and woke up as Jordanians. Even the tiny land that the Jews occupy today, the UN wants to give half of it to the Arabs under the pseudo-name of the State of Palestine, Gaza Strip and West Bank. Only the Vatican and Obama's administration seem to recognize and support that jihadi state. The President Obama drafted and strongly backed up the recent UN's resolution which condemns Israel and forbids the Jews constructing new settlements in their own country. Thank God the years of that Muslim undercover US president are over, and million times thank God for the new US President Donald Trump. The US President Donald Trump comes 50 years before his time. President Trump comes at the wrong time. The world in general and the USA in particular are not yet prepared for an honest president as Donald Trump who calls a spade a spade. President Obama was the right person for his time because he knew how to beguile his American people and please the Palestinians and Muslims whom he loves more than the Jews and Christians. He is a Muslim in heart but a professing Christian. How can a person who made fun of the Holy Bible be a true Christian? Everybody seems to be against Donald Trump. The American media depicts him as a bad president who doesn't know what he is doing. The Western media likewise portrays him as a bad leader. Many Americans protested against his inauguration and considered him not to be their president. Women marched in thousands against him. The Arab and Muslim media demonizes him. Even, the Arabic Western TV channels such as BBC and France 24 openly express their deep hatred towards President Donald Trump. One Arabic speaker in France 24 predicts and wishes the assassination of President Donald Trump. A female Palestinian-American professor claims that President Donald Trump doesn't know how to speak the American language. The leader of CAIR, Hussam Alish, the Los Angeles head of CAIR, calls the U.S. President Donald Trump an emperor without clothes and said to the Muslim imam who recited the Quran on the second day of President Trump's inauguration, "Don't lend him a towel." If he said such thing about any Muslim or Arab president or king, he would be put to death without trial. Nihad Awad, co-founder of CAIR, threatens to sue Mr. President for saying, "Islam hates us." Hussam Alish calls for violent overthrow of Donald Trump government. 16 Muslim countries ban Israelis from entering their countries: Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Lebanon, Libya, Malaysia, Oman, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, Syria, United Arab Emirates, Yemen, Algeria, Brunei, and Bangladesh. Yet, no one protests or condemns these countries. In addition, Iran, Kuwait, Lebanon, Libya, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen do not allow entry to people with evidence of travel to Israel, or whose passports have either a used or an unused Israeli visa. Some of those 16 countries would condemn its citizens of treason and put them to death if they find Israeli visas in their passports. Foreigners with Israeli visas in their travel history would be denied entry at the airport and sent back to wherever they come from. Why then people are protesting the ban of those 7 Muslim countries by Trump administration? Why Muslim countries are allowed to ban Israeli citizens and no other country is allowed by UN to ban Muslims? Why the double standard by UN and leaders of the world who condemn the ban of Muslims of those 7 countries by President Donald Trump? Ironically, most of the protesters at the American airports are bearded Muslim men, potential terrorists, and veiled Muslim women, abused women. They invoke human rights while they have none of those rights in their misogynistic and terror-inspiring religion. In reality, President Donald Trump is doing everything he can in order to benefit his American people and protect his country. He orders the building of the Mexican border wall to prevent the influx of illegal immigrants. He wants to deport illegal immigrants. Every country in the world wants to ensure that no one should be allowed in its soil without the due process of the law and proper documents. Mexicans are neither refugees nor persecuted or displaced citizens in their own countries so that they can seek political asylum in U.S. During his political campaigns, President Donald Trump promised to ban temporarily Muslims from entering America. After his inauguration, he modified his decision and restricted the ban to 7 Muslim countries: Iraq, Syria, Libya, Iran, Sudan, Somalia, and Yemen. This is a fatal mistake and a dangerous compromise, and Americans might pay for it by their lives. Remember, out of the 19 plane hijackers of September 11, not a single one of them from those 7 countries. The majority are from Saudi Arabia, 15 Saudi hijackers, and Gulf countries, 2 hijackers. Their ringleader, Muhammad Atta, was an Egyptian. One of them was a Lebanese. Afghanistan was the safe haven for Osama bin Laden and his Al-Qaeda, and the land where the plot for that cowardly terrorist attacks was masterminded. Pakistan is another Muslim country which produces the biggest number of terrorists in the world. Not to mention Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, Egypt, Jordan, Nigeria, Oman, Bangladesh, Turkey, Indonesia, among others. Even many European Muslim countries and non-Muslim countries have produced and continue to produce many Islamic terrorists. By banning only 7 countries out of 55 Muslim countries, the threat of terrorist attacks in the U.S. soil cannot be curbed. The only practical solution is for President Donald Trump to go back to his promise and ban each and every Muslim from entering the USA. After 50 years from now, maybe another honest president comes and takes the final step and ban Islam, because it is intrinsically evil and produces nothing good except terrorists. The most accurate response to the Vatican's abominable recognition is given by Pamela Geller. Just as with Nazi Germany, the Vatican is on the wrong side of history again. In a supreme act of timitude and submission, the Vatican has signed a treaty with the terror entity, euphemistically known as the State of Palestine. Decades of terror and slaughter are rewarded by the central governing body of the Catholic Church. Refusal to live side by side with the tiny Jewish state is rewarded with official recognition from the Vatican. The wholesale slaughter of Christians by the very same adherents to the ideology of the Palestinian state is largely ignored by the Vatican. Instead, sweeping declarations of idiocy are issued with solemnity, such as equating Islam with violence was wrong. And so on. Vatican signs treaty with terror State of Palestine. Pamela Geller, June 26, 2015. Jeffrey Grider gives yet another precise response to that ungodly and unholy treaty. The Vatican had welcomed the decision by the UN General Assembly in 2012 to recognize a Palestinian state and had referred to the Palestine state since. No other country except the Vatican has ever recognized the decision of the UN. The United States and Israel strongly opposed the UN's decision. But the treaty signed by the Vatican marked its first legal recognition of the Palestinian territory as a state. As we inch closer and closer to the time of the rapture of the Church, we also move closer to the start of the Great Tribulation. Pope Francis, in his role as the false prophet, is doing everything he can to stack the deck against Israel. Today's peace treaty and recognition of the State of Palestine greatly advances the prophetical time clock. Israel, take note, the Pope and the Vatican are your sworn enemies, as they have once again proved today. Tick, tock, anyone paying attention? Vatican signs treaty with the State of Palestine by Jeffrey Grider, June 26, 2015. The Promised Land is an eternal promise for the Jews by Yahweh, the God of the Bible, and God will never change it because His promises are irrevocable. Romans 11, 25-32. In Deuteronomy 32-5, Moses said, and when you and your children return to the Lord your God and obey Him with all your heart and with all your soul according to everything I command you today, then the Lord your God will restore your fortunes and have compassion on you and gather you again from all the nations where He scattered you. Even if you have been banished to the most distant land under the heavens, from there the Lord your God will gather you and bring you back. He will bring you to the land that belonged to your ancestors, and you will take possession of it. He will make you more prosperous and numerous than your ancestors. We need to know how and why the Church of Rome assumed primacy over all other churches of Christ. According to Hans Kohn, by the end of the 1st century, the Church of Rome became the most important church due to its location in the city of Rome, the capital of the Roman Empire, and the belief that Peter and Paul died and were buried in Rome. As time passed, the Church of Rome grew into a powerful centralized system that began to dominate and rule other churches of the world. However, the claim that God alone founded the Catholic Church has no scriptural or apostolic basis. Even the tradition of the first 5 centuries of Christianity does not support such a claim. Kohn also argued against the doctrine of papal infallibility, the belief that the Pope of Rome is infallible. He showed how the doctrine was invented and how it was used as a tool to persecute other Christians. Through this doctrine the Pope became an emperor and ruled the entire world. The papal state persecuted, burned, and tortured many innocent people. Many scientists, philosophers, theologians, thinkers, and women were condemned as heretics and witches and burned at the stake or otherwise tortured. In an article entitled, "What is the Essence of Apostolic Succession?" Kohn criticized the Catholic hierarchical order of the Church, which resembles a pyramid in which the Pope is the head followed by the cardinals, patriarchs, archbishops, bishops, priests, and laity. Kohn argued that this hierarchical order contradicts the Bible and must be rethought today for successful ecumenical relations. Kohn, 1968, page 22. In Europe, until the year 1400 AD, there was no divided knowledge of the sacred versus the secular. God, man, dignity of man, morality were all drawn from the Bible. Everything was based on Judeo-Christian worldview of the Bible. There was one united vision. God made Himself known to man through the Bible. God is the Creator, man is created in the image of God, Satan caused the man's fall, sin entered the world, and God provided redemption through His Son. The corruption began because the Roman Catholic Church added unscriptural teachings to the Bible. It taught that for man to achieve salvation and maintain it, he has to do certain things. Salvation can be achieved only through becoming a member of the Church of Rome, the Mother Church. The Church could grant salvation and it could uphold it from people. Mary was exalted and became co-redemptive with Christ. Dead saints and their relics could now bestow blessing and healing upon the living. Through the selling of indulgences and demanding the payment of tithes, the Church accumulated much tax-free riches and wealth. Majority of the people at that time were peasants and the Church summarily demanded a 10% tithe. People had to pay money for their baptisms, marriages, and burials. Besides, the Church invented the use of indulgences where people had to pay money to atone for their sins and also to avoid going to purgatory or shorting their stay at purgatory. People were encouraged to pay indulgences for their loved ones who died and supposedly suffering in purgatory. There was story told of Dominic when he came to Rome to obtain permission to start his order. The Pope took him on a tour to show him the wealth and treasures of the Church. Then, the Pope said to him, "Peter can no longer say 'Silver and gold have I none,'" to which Dominic responded, "No, neither can he say 'Rise and walk.'" They were referring to Acts chapter 3, verse 6. Therefore, adding to the Bible, the tradition of the Church took precedence over the Bible. By the year 1500 AD, the Church became a dangerous institution. It reached a point beyond return. It could neither return to where it was nor be reformed from within. Through the Reformation, the Reformers did not bring something new, but went back to the Bible. Traditionally, whenever there was a difference in doctrinal issue, the bishops of all churches came together as a council to solve the problems. But, the Church of Rome began to do things which were not supported by the Bible. It made the Frankish king, Charlemagne, the head of the pseudo-Holy Roman Empire. It invented many doctrines such as the supremacy of the Church of Rome, the infallibility of the Pope, purgatory, the use of indulgences, the Inquisition, the Crusades, etc. The Church also adopted the teachings of Augustine, which he took from Plato, and the teachings of Thomas Aquinas, which he borrowed from Aristotle. During medieval period, philosophy became a handmaiden to theology. At that time, philosophy and theology went hand in hand. In those days, very few people knew how to read and write. Charles the Great, Charlemagne, was an illiterate king. He did not know to read or write. No one was allowed to read the Bible. Only the priests read the Bible in Latin, a dead language unknown to the laity. The clergy were allowed to educate people on the Bible. On Christmas Day, of 800 AD, the Pope Leo III took a crown and put it on the head of Charlemagne and declared him the head of the Holy Roman Empire. Before that day, there was no such thing as a Holy Roman Empire, but Pope Leo III invented it because the Church needed military power to protect it. For 800 years, the Church relied on God's protection. Then, Charlemagne became the Don Corleone, the godfather, of the Church. The Church now felt it had absolute power. Truth got clouded and lost through the innumerable Pope's edicts. Individuality was lost. There was no longer an individual relationship to God. The individual had relation only to the Roman Catholic Church. The Church stood between God and man. The Pope became the representative of Christ on earth. He was not much different from the Muslim caliph who represented Allah on earth. Therefore, life in Europe lost its meaning. Every individual was just waiting to die and go to heaven via purgatory. He had to build up enough merit to help him spend less time in purgatory. The more he purchased indulgences, the lesser time he would spend in purgatory, as he was told.